Johnny Carson had been hosting The Tonight Show for 30 years. 30 years of interviews with movie stars, politicians, musicians, athletes. He'd mastered the art of conversation. Knew how to make people comfortable. Knew when to push and when to pull back. Knew the difference between a story someone wanted to tell and a truth they needed to share. But that night, something felt different from the moment Clint Eastwood walked through the curtain. It was 1986. Clint was at the height of his career. Dirty Harry. The man with no name. American icon. The strong, silent type both on screen and off. He didn't do many talk shows. Didn't need to. His work spoke for itself. But when he agreed to come on The Tonight Show, the producers were thrilled. A rare get. A guaranteed ratings night. Clint arrived at NBC that afternoon quiet and professional. No entourage. No demands. Just showed up, shook hands with the crew, sat for a quick pre-interview with one of the producers. Standard stuff. They talked about his new film. His directing career. Safe territory. Easy conversation. But when the producer asked if there was anything specific Clint wanted to discuss, Clint paused. Looked down at his hands. Then said something that made the producer's pen stop moving. "There's something I've been carrying for a long time," Clint said quietly. "I think it's time I said it out loud." The producer waited. Clint didn't elaborate. Just said, "I'll tell Johnny when the time's right." The show started normally. Johnny's monologue landed well. The audience was warm. A musical guest performed. Then came the moment. Ed McMahon's voice boomed across the studio. "And now, here's Clint Eastwood." The audience erupted. Clint walked out with that characteristic slow, confident stride. Shook Johnny's hand. Sat down in the guest chair. The interview began exactly as expected. Johnny asked about the new movie. Clint answered with his typical understated charm. A few laughs. A few stories. Professional. Polished. Perfect. But about 8 minutes in, something shifted. Johnny asked a throwaway question. "Clint, you've been in this business for what, 35 years now? What keeps you going?" Clint looked at Johnny. Really looked at him. Not the performer-to-performer look. Something else. Something personal. "Can I tell you something, Johnny?" Clint said. His voice was different. Quieter. Something I've never said publicly before. The studio went quiet. Not the dramatic silence of a planned reveal. The organic silence of people sensing something real was about to happen. Johnny set down his note cards. Leaned back slightly. Giving Clint space. "Of course," Johnny said simply. Clint took a breath. 31 years ago, before I was anyone, before the movies, before any of this, I was working construction. 25 years old. Broke. Trying to break into acting but getting nowhere. And I got a call that changed my life. Johnny didn't interrupt. Didn't rush. Just listened. My younger brother, Marcus, was in Vietnam. Marines. And I got the telegram. He'd been killed. Ambush outside Da Nang. He was 19 years old. The audience gasped softly. Johnny's expression changed immediately. This wasn't entertainment anymore. Carson stopped mid-monologue. The entire studio froze. I went home for the funeral. Clint continued, his voice steady but carrying weight. Small town in California. My parents were destroyed. My mother couldn't even stand at the grave. And I remember thinking, I'm the older brother. I should have protected him. Should have done something. Johnny leaned forward slightly. Clint, you couldn't have, I know that now. Clint interrupted gently. But at 25 I didn't. And at the funeral, my father pulled me aside. He was a quiet man. Didn't show emotion much. And he said something I've carried every day since. Clint paused. The camera stayed on his face. You could see him gathering himself. He said Marcus loved movies. Loved stories. He used to tell me about this brother of his who was going to be in pictures someday. Who was going to make something that mattered? And I need you to do that now. Not for you. For him. Because he doesn't get to see how his story ends. But you do. So make it count. The studio was completely silent. 300 people holding their breath. Doc Severinsen had stopped shuffling his sheet music. Ed McMahon's eyes were wet. And that's what I've been doing for 31 years, Clint said. Every role. Every film. Every choice. I've been trying to make it count. Not for the fame. Not for the money. For Marcus. Because he deserved to see how stories end. And since he couldn't, I decided I'd tell enough stories for both of us. Johnny didn't speak for a moment. Couldn't. He reached up and adjusted his glasses. Tell. The thing he did when he was fighting emotion. Why are you telling this now? Johnny finally asked, his voice gentler than usual. Clint looked directly at Johnny. Because yesterday was the anniversary. 31 years. And I realized I've been carrying this alone for too long. My family knows. But I've never said it publicly. Never let people know that everything I've done, all of it, started with a promise to my father at a graveside. Backstage, he made a choice no producer would have ever allowed. Johnny stood up. Not dramatically. Not for show. Just stood. Walked around his desk. Extended his hand to Clint. Clint stood too. They shook hands. Then Johnny did something he rarely did on camera. He pulled Clint into a brief, firm hug. The audience didn't know whether to applaud or stay silent. They stayed silent. Witnessing. Not performing. When they separated, Johnny looked at the camera. We're going to take a commercial break. But before we do, I want to say something. He turned back to Clint. Your brother would be proud. Not of the fame. Not of the success. Of the man who kept a promise. Clint nodded. Just once. Sharp. Definitive. They cut to commercial. But during the break, something remarkable happened. The crew, hardened professionals who'd seen everything, started applauding. Quietly at first. Then louder. The camera operators. The lighting techs. The production assistants. People who usually stayed invisible. All clapping for a man who'd carried grief for 3 decades and finally set it down. When they came back from commercial, Johnny was back at his desk. Clint was back in his chair. But everything felt different. Clint, Johnny said, is there something Marcus would have wanted people to know? About him? Clint smiled. Small but genuine. He had a terrible sense of humor. Loved puns. Drove everyone crazy with them. And he played guitar. Not well. But enthusiastically. Used to sit on the porch and play until the neighbors complained. Johnny laughed. So did the audience. The tension broke. But the weight remained. You know what I think? Johnny said. I think every time you make a film, there's a kid in a theater somewhere who's the younger sibling. Who looks up to their older brother or sister. And they see your movies and they think, my sibling could do that. Could be that strong. That brave. And maybe that's part of Marcus's legacy too. The inspiration you've given to people who needed it. Clint's jaw tightened. He nodded slowly. I'd like to think so. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Johnny reached into his desk drawer. Pulled out a cue card. The kind he used for jokes. But this one was blank. He picked up a pen. Wrote something. Then held it up to the camera. In Johnny's handwriting. Marcus Eastwood, 1947 to 1955, American hero. The years were wrong. Johnny had made a mistake. Clint noticed. Gently corrected him. 1946 to 1965, Johnny. Johnny crossed out the numbers. Wrote the correct ones. I'm sorry, he said. I wanted to get it right. You did, Clint said. Just by writing his name. Johnny set the card down on his desk. Right in the center. Where everyone could see it. This stays here for the rest of the show, he said. So Marcus is here too. The audience erupted. Not in applause. In something else. A standing ovation that wasn't about celebration. About acknowledgement. About saying, we see this. We witness this. We honor this. When the applause finally died down, Johnny turned to Clint with a question that came from somewhere deeper than his usual interviewer mode. Did Marcus ever see you act? Even in small roles? Clint shook his head. No. I was doing walk-ons. Bit parts. Nothing substantial. He shipped out before I got anything real. But he believed I would. He'd tell his unit about me. Apparently drove them crazy talking about his brother who was going to be a movie star. Johnny smiled sadly. So he never got to say I told you so. No. But I say it for him. Every time I finish a film, I think, Marcus, you were right. I made it. We made it. But this was the moment no one in the studio, nor anyone at home, ever saw coming. From the audience, an older man stood up. Military uniform. Dress blues. Had to be in his 60s. He cleared his throat. Mr. Eastwood? May I say something? Security moved to intercept. Johnny waved them off. Let him speak. The man's voice was steady. Military bearing even in his older age. I served with Marcus Eastwood. 3rd Battalion, 3rd Marines. I was there the day he died. I held his hand. And his last words were about you. Clint went completely still. The veteran continued. He said, tell my brother I'm sorry I won't be there to see him on the big screen. But I already see him. He's going to be great. Those were his last words, sir. And I've been looking for you for 31 years to tell you that. The studio erupted. Clint stood. Walked to where the veteran was standing. They embraced. Two strangers connected by a 19-year-old kid who died in a jungle halfway around the world. Johnny had stopped trying to maintain composure. He wiped his eyes openly. Doc Severinsen signaled the band. They started playing softly. Not a specific song. Just gentle music. A soundtrack for grief that had finally found its voice. When Clint returned to his seat, when the veteran sat back down, when the music faded, Johnny picked up the cue card with Marcus's name. Held it carefully. This doesn't go in the trash after the show, Johnny said. This gets framed. And it goes in my office. As a reminder that the stories we tell matter. That the promises we keep matter. That the brothers we lose are never really gone as long as someone remembers them. Clint's voice was rough when he spoke. Thank you, Johnny. No. Thank you. For trusting us with this. For letting Marcus be here tonight. The interview continued for a few more minutes. Lighter topics. Easier ground. But everyone knew something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't the Tonight Show anymore. It was something bigger. A memorial. A healing. A moment where entertainment stepped aside and let humanity through. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. After the show, Clint stayed. Talked with the veteran for over an hour. Learned about Marcus's final months. The jokes he told. The letters he wrote. The way he talked about home. The producers didn't rush them. Didn't clear the studio. Just let two men sit in an empty theater and remember a boy who deserved more time. Johnny kept his promise. The cue card was framed. Hung in his office at NBC. Later, when he retired, he took it with him. It hung in his home office until the day he died. In his will, he left instructions. The card should go to Clint Eastwood. With a note. Marcus was here. And he's still here. Keep telling stories. JC. Clint received the card in 2005, 2 years after Johnny's death. He kept it in his own office. And before every film he directed, he'd look at it. A reminder. A promise kept. A brother honored. The veteran who'd stood up that night became Clint's friend. They met once a year on the anniversary. Told Marcus stories. Kept him alive through memory. 31 years of silence. One night of truth. And a legacy that proved the most powerful stories aren't the ones we perform, they're the ones we carry. The ones we finally find the courage to say out loud. Marcus Eastwood never made it home from Vietnam. But that night on The Tonight Show, he finally got to see his brother on the big screen. Not in a film. And something more important. In a moment of truth that reminded everyone watching, we honor the lost by living fully. By keeping promises. By making it count, and Clint Eastwood has been making it count ever since.